Another day, another Souls-like. Still, despite of the genre being slowly oversaturated with time, I can't seem to be yet bored of it. And straight from China, we have Wuchang Fallen Feathers. The game I was really excited for since we've been presented with the first trailer, because it is a Chinese game and usually those don't disappoint, at least me. And I can say it's definitely a Souls-like game. It doesn't just say it's a Souls-like and then does something completely different, more reminiscent of an action RPG with Souls-like elements. Wuchang actually commits to being a full-blown Souls-like, and at the same time it introduces some of its own ideas that weren't present in any other games, but often those ideas kinda get overlooked because they don't really do much difference when you are playing the game if you were to decide to just straight up ignore them. I'm going to start with the performance because after release of the PC version of this game, I'm going to start with the performance because after the release, the PC version of the game was on everyone's mouth because it was simply a mess. And the game wasn't really well optimized. And from Steam reviews, discussion forums, and Reddit, it seemed like only people who were able to actually run this game at steady frames without any problems were people who had like RTX 4080 and up. And I personally decided to play this game on a console. The later I tested it on PC after some patches were out, and on Xbox Series X I found the game to lose frames in certain areas, and I see that the PlayStation 5 is pretty similar. And sometimes whenever I would go through the location, I entered, for an example, the location, and there is like a name of the location that pops on the screen, and my sound would crackle at this time. And there would be also for an example, lag happening to the audio. As the game stutters, audio also stutters. So the cracking isn't loud, but it is pretty annoying. But the game was completely playable, and it didn't lose frames in the fight, but it did kind of manage to lose a enemy sound in one location twice in the same spot. Like there would be no sound made by the enemy for a few seconds, despite of them charging at me, hitting me and screaming at me to stun. So there would be no sound at all. Even as they were hitting me, there would be no sound. The PS5 version I mentioned earlier, I couldn't test it myself, but looking through the footage online because I was interested how the game performs on the other console, the live streams and the videos online presented that like the game works the same. Like the frame drops on Xbox are in the same place and in the same capacity as they are on the PlayStation 5. The one different thing, the PlayStation 5 doesn't seem to have an audio issues, and I would also like to note that it's not really my console specifically having this issue, because all the games work completely fine with no sound issues. So like Wuchang actually did have a sound issues, so that's definitely a problem with the port with the game. As for PC, after patches on RTX 3060, the game keeps 45 to 65 frame rate, and personally I think stable 40 would be better than unstable, constantly jumpy frame rate from 40 to 60. But at the same time, the game seems to be like playable if you don't mind these jumps and the low FPS at points. It is playable, it works, and during the boss fights it doesn't seem to lose a lot of frames, and that is not going to kinda tamper with your experience. And now I can finally get to talk about the game itself. Wuchang is a Souls-like game with an action set in Shu during a Ming dynasty. The kingdom is taken over by the plague, and the Wuchang tries to save it. From the start she is affected by the plague herself and experiences the feathering that turns everyone into monsters, but she is kind of resistant and she is able to keep her mind working and she doesn't lose her mind. And that's why she is able to overcome it and tries to save Kingdom and stop the madness happening around her. So she also hears the echoes of her sister in the mind, and there are places where you can hear, for an example, more of these echoes, like for an example when you are paying respects in front of the altars or stuff like this. And the game itself has a really interesting storyline that I'm not going to be spoiling, because to say something about the premise more, I would really have to go into the spoilers. And I really found it amazing how bad ending, I would say, is probably the most, I don't know, interesting out of the bunch. Like, seriously, the bad ending, I think, is the most interesting out of the bunch. The game itself is a true Souls-like. At the beginning it feels like it may be a little bit linear, but as you progress through the game opens up more and more, and the next locations start opening up even more than the previous ones, to the point that the last few locations literally feel like a maze, especially the last location. There is a plenty of enemies of various types, and some of them appear only in certain locations and other ones appear in all of them, but there is not really any point of like hunting specific enemy type, because they don't drop anything. So you can just go through the game, you don't have to really search for the certain types of the enemy. The only enemies that drop important items are the feather monsters that have red glowy eyes. Those are kinda harder to defeat, and the feathers are needed to upgrade your weapon. The enemies in the game overall are pretty easy, I would say. It feels like the game doesn't really have a high difficulty bar, and after a certain amount of time you realize that this applies only to the regular enemies, because some boss fights are completely different story. And the game tricks you, because the first 4 hours or so of the game feels like it may be a good entry point to the Souls-like genre if you search for the way into the genre itself. And after 4 hours you get to like a maybe third boss fight, and you have Honglan happen. So if you are not very experienced Souls-like enthusiast, buckle up, because this fight is a difficulty jump from 10 to 200, and I am not over-exaggerating. I myself love Souls-like games, but I am terrible at them. Yet somehow I beat Dark Souls and for the first time, and I was surprised how easy the game was. Wuchang is not easy. It's an opposite of easy. I spent fighting Honglan like 3-4 hours trying different tactics, and only decided to unlock the deflect in the skill tree. Yes. Why? Because this game doesn't have parry by default. You don't really have parry, they call it deflect, which feels like a parry, and you have to have right weapon equipped to use it, and you have to have skill unlocked in the skill tree that you need to farm points to even get to the skill to unlock it, and then you are able to deflect enemy attacks. It is the first time I have seen such a crucial element of the game, such a crucial mechanic, being locked under the skill in the skill tree that you have to unlock, and if you for some reason didn't, you will have to spend few points to be even able to unlock it. You will have to grind it if you don't have any points left. Most bosses pose a challenge. I had a problem defeating quite a few of them. However, the one I've been told is the hardest one in the game, I managed to defeat under 10 tries. If the boss is a humanoid, you can simply use the tactic of, if the boss is humanoid, there is a one simple tactic to defeat them easily. Go in behind them, heavy hit them in the back to do the backstab and perform the finisher. And you have to repeat that a few times in combination with a skill called Crescent Arc, which serves as a dodge but backwards. You can defeat most of the bosses without breaking any sweat. However, the last boss in the game is a huge disappointment. It was the second easiest boss in the entire game, and the easiest one was the very first boss that you encounter, because it basically kind of felt like more of a tutorial boss. And the last boss is the reskin of the phase 1 of the penultimate boss with wings added to it and sword that he barely even uses during the fight, making him incredibly easy to defeat. And it took me like 4 or 5 tries to finish him when I would spend hours trying to defeat some of the previous bosses. This one, I wasn't even angry. I was just going in, oh, that I did mess up the inputs. Oh, I mess up something in here. Now, I wasn't even angry. 4 or 5 tries and I finished him, and that was the end game. And I was surprised. I was kind of disappointed. I was actually counting for like 2 phases or something more extraordinary, but in here we just got the reskin of the previous boss with the wings, and that is it. There are also plenty of like statuses in the game that will hurt you or kill you instantly even. So depending on the environment that you are in, you will be forced to like juggle your armor like you are in the circus, because you constantly need the resistance to something different. Moving through the mines, you will be exposed to corruption that is inflicted and will also steal your life pretty fast, and it does last pretty long, so you can unpoison yourself, but you also have to have the purple petals if you want to unpoison yourself. And usually you don't really keep them under your fast items, so you have to go into the equipment. So if you are in the middle of the fight and the poison is and the corruption is inflicted on you, you will have to genuinely just defeat the enemy with the status on you, and then after the fight, if you are still alive, quickly unpoison yourself and heal yourself. The same mines have also plenty of bugs that inflict blight. Moving through the different locations, you will encounter this light bulb head guy. If you are exposed to the light, he will inflict despair onto you, which if you catch this status completely, you are instantly dead. You cannot do anything. And during the fight, you will prefer most of the time to have a strong resistance against slash attack. And the same armor that is the strongest against slash attack is -30 into despair. So if you forget to change your armor after the boss fight, for an example, and you will meet with the lamp guy over there, you are instantly dead within like 2-3 seconds. And what is this? Snowy Land? Well, there is a frostbite, so you have to put some anti-frostbite clothes, and this is probably least deadly and most of the nothing burger status you will encounter in the game, with one thing that it can actually hit you in the middle of the fight and will break your combo. This game does force you to use literally everything that you possess, and you got plenty of items, most of which like the usable items. I kind of felt like most of them were pretty useless, like plenty of pills, the stamina refills, and the items that raise your madness status. Yes, madness. This game has something nice and interesting added to it, and it's not really functioning very well. So madness mechanic is that you die and your madness level rises. Your attacks tend to get stronger, but if you die with full madness and you try to get your souls back, the stain is going to basically turn into the madness and you will be forced to fight it. However, if you die close to the point of the respawn, it will start hitting you before you even gain control over your character, and you will lose all points altogether. Sometimes the madness will, for example, not spawn if you died a few times, and I died a few times with madness level full, and the madness enemy would not spawn. And one time I did decide to not fight the madness and just run away from her, and I was able to go back, pick up my points anyways, because the game wouldn't spawn the madness for the second time. That one felt a little bit like cheating. I don't know if this was intended or is a problem with the madness mechanic functioning at this point, but the madness would not always spawn when it was supposed to spawn, so something is not right with the mechanic itself. Usually it happened in the late stages of the game. The one thing that they also introduced in Wuchang is arm needles that you get to use in different acupoints, so you would get additional boost. But I found that it is pretty interesting. However, I didn't get much needles despite of my insane level of exploration, because when I play the game I lick the walls, and I didn't get any like much needles, so I ignored this thing for the most of my playthrough, and I didn't really feel the need to engage with it. Did meddle with it in the later stages of the game just out of curiosity, but I didn't really feel like it did much difference. And also, stuff like weapon upgrades and potion upgrades are hidden behind the secrets, the collectibles kind of. So you have to upgrade your potions, and the amount of potions and the potency of potions. You will have to search for these crates which contain, for an example, Forgotten Remembrance or Lost Remains, and it will allow you to upgrade potions. There is no other way to upgrade them. Same goes for the weapons. Specific types of feathers are needed to upgrade any weapons to the higher levels. And from one side it is different and fun, but it's also annoying because the game doesn't really give you like a huge selection of weapons. And for longsword that I was playing with mainly, I had 3 longswords, and the second one, which I acquired like in the second hour of the game, this was the best sword that I got throughout the entire game, and I used it throughout the entire game to the end. And the only way to make it better was to search for the locations of the red-eyed enemies and pray that this is the one that is going to give you, for an example, Radiant Feather, not Brilliant Feather. Why? Because there are different feathers required from you after a certain amount of upgrades, and you finally get to the point when you need like 6 Brilliant Feathers, and then you need 4 Radiant Feathers, which Radiant Feathers are the rarest ones in the game, and not really, because after that there is even one that is even rarer than that. And the game also does have like plenty of side quests and a lot of NPCs with full-blown dialogues. Unlike in any Souls games that I played, the quests can be missed, and some of them are required for a good or true ending. If you miss at least one of the quests from the certain NPC, you will be locked to the bad ending no matter what you're going to do in the game moving forward. There's also a secret ending that you may trigger accidentally if you are not aware of it existing, and you, for an example, trigger that ending. It will lock you out of the last region of the game, and you will skip 2 mandatory boss fights and 2 side bosses. There is no indications whatsoever that this may happen in the game. Personally, I knew beforehand that what questline was required for the good ending. I noticed it unintentionally before I even started playing the game, and I was able to lock in like the 2 endings, the best 2 endings that I really wanted to obtain. And if I made one choice in the conversation differently, I would accidentally lock myself out of the last region of the game and the last few bosses. And the regions itself are great. They look great, they are nice to traverse through, with an exception of the part of Zenu, which I think may be the worst region, which I think these may be the worst locations in the game, like, and going through those buildings were not fun at all. I think the last region of the entire game is more fun to traverse through than those buildings. The maps at times do get convoluted and you lose your way where you should go. There's also a really small amount of shrines, this game's bonfires, and the levels are made in a way that instead of putting shrines, they unlock shortcuts to the one and only shrine, for an example, that is present in this location. So making you like go 30 seconds to the minute through the shortcut because they wouldn't just put shrine. And the worst is probably the elevators in the last region. The shrine shortcut, if you die, for an example, or you just want to go back to spend your points, you have to wait 35 seconds for an elevator to go down and then 35 seconds for the same elevator to go up again. Wasting a minute of your time standing on the elevator, it is not a skill issue. You don't battle any enemies. You just stand on the elevator for a minute or so. If you have 100k points and you want to spend them and not lose them to the big enemies ahead, you will need to stand on this freaking elevator because creators had a problem to put shrine upstairs instead of the elevator, and it feels like just a padding to make your playthrough longer. And the creators love their dirty tricks. You will have plenty of traps in the game. Buttons that will set you on fire and kill you with arrows, spikes from the ground, rolling boulders from around the corner when you least expect it, mines hidden in the snow, the freaking shrine instead of being your savior grabbing you and pummeling you into the ground. Yes, you have to sometimes kill the shrine to be able to save. Intriguing yet annoying as hell. And yes, there are problems with the game too. I didn't forget about them. The performance is questionable, and yes, the elevators suck. Fine. The problems are with hitboxes. Usually visible at certain fights, there were situations where my hits were visibly going through the enemy and it wasn't counted and the enemy wasn't moving, like, because sometimes the enemies in the boss fights usually can dodge, and I am talking about the moments when the enemy would be still and the game would not count the hit. Happened multiple times when I was playing the game. There are also moments where you get hit despite of the being outside of the enemy's range, and that happened also multiple times, and it wouldn't be as bad if nearly all of the attacks made by the enemy knock you down and the animations of you getting up is incredibly slow, and there is also no iframes, so you can be killed as you lay on the ground and you cannot move. There are moments when the enemy would just blast you to death as soon as you, for an example, open the door, because that happens. And usually the games are made because there has to be a way for you to win every run if you do against the enemy or the boss. In this instance, there is no such a thing. There are moments when the run is set for you to be failed because you get through the mist, you don't even get to control your character yet, and you get blasted by the enemy. That is the thing that happens in the game. At this point, you may also put down your controller and wait till you respawn. And one thing that is really unclear to me, personally, is the backstab itself. At times, it feels like it works perfectly. Every single time I perform backstab on a boss, it would be counted and I could, like, just execute the finisher move. And the other time, there would be no backstab happening at all, despite of the slash of the heavy hit being straight into the back of the enemy, standing still, me being on a full stamina. I don't know if this mechanic is really inconsistent and it is basically a lottery that is done on purpose, or is it buggy and it doesn't work as it was intended, but the lottery of it is really annoying. A lottery that, just like the attacks of the bosses who shoot projectiles at you, because everything feels like they don't have any continuity of attacks, they don't really think, they just use the attacks as a just roll of the dice. So despite of you being, for an example, so close to the boss that you could actually kiss each other, the enemy is going to start shooting projectiles at you, but at the time when you're going to be like really huge distance from the enemy is not going to shoot the projectile. They're going to just do normal attacks, waving the swords or kicking the air. For an example, me being the whole map away from Honglan, she decides to kick the air and stomp the water, and being close to her in the second fight, she throws the red projectiles at me when I am basically that we could actually kiss. Same with the Madness Demon and her shooting the cannon, like, make it make sense. That was the peak of the whole playthrough of mine, where the boss would die, and this, for an example, that would be the peak of my whole playthrough, where the boss would die and his attack would disappear, but the game decided to lock me in the animation of being hit as I couldn't even move after the fight, and it ended up killing me, costing me 40k souls as I lost to the madness right after that. Just lovely. And the last thing that I've seen in a lot of games that happen, the Souls-likes, you can hit the enemies through the walls. So if you are standing in front of the wall, you can just slice the enemies behind the wall, behind the tree. Enemies can kill you through the wall, through the tree, through the solid objects. It is happening constantly. The same thing was happening in Notria, another Souls-like game that I really enjoyed, but it had plenty of problems that released broken, to the point when I genuinely almost lost my save because I got stuck in the elevator and the game saved on this elevator. So this thing happens and your sword should either bounce from the wall or it should not count you hitting someone as the sword goes through the wall itself, because that should not work, but this game does that. So plenty of times I would just be bored and start fighting the enemy through the wall because, well, you are the hard enemy, I don't feel like fighting you again, so I'm going to fight you through the wall. And basically this works. This works every single time, and sometimes when you need to find some safety from the enemy to like heal yourself, you're going to stand behind the tree or something, and the enemy is going to hit you straight through the tree because the game is designed like that. I really don't understand how you can make a Souls-like game and you are allowed to hit the enemies through the walls. And they are able to do this because there is one instance when there is a door in the middle of the wall and there is the enemy right behind this door. You can you can kill this enemy through the wall, but if you are going to try to attack him through the door that are closed from the other side, the game is not going to count those hits. So you can do it, you just didn't for some reason. Overall, I did enjoy the game. It was quite a challenge and I had my ups and downs playing it. There were some problems that definitely need fixing, but the game overall is nice and completely playable, even with the problems that I mentioned. I personally do recommend picking this one up. It is not full-priced game, it is $50, and if you have a very good PC or PlayStation 5, it seems like a PlayStation 5 edition is a little bit better than the Xbox Series X one, but you can play it on Xbox too, it's completely playable, and yeah, PlayStation 5 seems better, at least in the audio aspect. I didn't see anyone's having a problem with the audio, I did have problems with the audio on Xbox. I hope the studio responsible for Wuchang won't be discouraged by the Steam reviews, and they will proceed making more games, and hopefully with a similar setting, because the setting is really nice and we don't see this one very often, and it adds to the experience. And I hope they are going to maybe make next game more polished, that would, for an example, I don't know, not allow you to kill the enemies through the walls. But I say, well, the game is worth playing. It is an actual Souls-like, it doesn't pretend to be a Souls-like, it is a Souls-like. Yeah, that is it for this review. If you liked it, leave a like, subscribe, comment. Did you play Wuchang? Did you enjoy it? And what is your favorite Souls-like game? I'd say mine still probably would be Bloodborne. And have a nice day and see you in the next video. Bye.